Okay, so let's pick up the Adaptations 3 at hibernation. Whew, after this last week and how cold it was, I felt like I needed to hibernate. But hibernation is an innate behavior, and remember we talked about innate, that's something that you're born with. It's not a learned behavior, but an innate behavior that's used by some animals to survive harsh winter conditions. So when you have these difficult conditions, there has to be a means of surviving them. And so there is this period of time in the winter when an animal is inactive or dormant. So its metabolism slows way down. There's all kinds of things that happen. They conserve energy during this period of time. Their body temperature lowers, their breathing is a lot slower, and so it allows them to survive in these low temperatures with no food. Bats are an example. Bats hibernate. Hedgehogs hibernate. Chipmunks hibernate. Oh, it's so cute. Look at that. Squirrels, some species, not all species of squirrels, but some hibernate. Rattlesnakes. Now, why do you think rattlesnakes would hibernate? Well, you just have to tell me why. Monotremes, or the egg-laying mammals, will hibernate. Some species, not all of them. Marsupials, like opossums, things like that, will hibernate. All right. Now, this hibernation itself, the actual period ranges from only a few days to several months. Of course, it depends on the environment. Think about that for a minute. If the environment is harsh for a very long time out of the year, then the animal's going to have to hibernate for longer because it's not going to be able to survive in that harsh environment. But if it's only in a harsh environment, like I think of Alaska, I mean, it's cold there for a very long time. It's not like, we used to joke that that summer was there and let's have a picnic, because it was pretty much one weekend. It was pretty quick. All right, so many people think that bears also hibernate, but they do not. Unlike true hibernators, the bear's metabolic processes don't slow dramatically, and so they do have this more dormant period, but bears are very easily aroused and can become active during the winter months, where if they were a true hibernator, everything slows and they wouldn't be able to come out of their active state as easily as they do. Okay, so this next slide is not about hibernation. It's something different, but it is a learned behavior. And it is about this very famous experiment that's conducted by Ivan Pavlov, in which the dog is trained to salivate, so it drools in response to the sound of a bell. You'll hear people talk about it as Pavlov's dog. It's a great experiment to know and understand, because the example is used all the time about training some sort of behavior. All right, so we start off here in the before conditioning phase. So Pavlov gave the dog some food, and the response that the dog had to the food was it salivated, it drooled. So at this point, the food is an unconditioned stimulus, and the dog salivating is an unconditioned response. So we move to the next phase of training the dog, and Pavlov rang a bell, which is a neutral stimulus, and the response of the dog was no salivation. So there's no conditioned response either. So nothing's really happened at this point. All right, now we're going into conditioning. So stage 3 of Pavlov's dog's experiment is Pavlov gave the dog the food, which we know before caused the salivation. So gave him the food along with ringing the bell. And the response was the unconditioned response, which was the salivating. And then lastly, there is the last step was when the conditioning has happened. Now, please understand that this conditioning, this didn't just happen like, he gave the food, rang the bell, and suddenly it all worked. I mean, this is over and over and over. So Same thing when you're training your dog to do something. You have to do it over and over and over. So eventually, what happened is then the food was removed, but when the bell rang, the dog still salivated. Remember, up here the bell rang and nothing happened. But because now the dog can associate the bell ringing with food, and it starts to salivate. So it's kind of like training your dog if you train with food. And so you train your dog with the food, and you keep giving it the food and whatever you're going to do, click or whistle or whatever you do, and then make some particular noise. And then eventually you can not give the dog the food, but you can still get the behavior that you're looking for. So again, this is called Pavlov's dog. This is a very famous experiment, and you hear this quoted all the time. All right, so again, so here's the question. Is the salivation of the dog in response to the bell an example of a learned behavior or an innate behavior? Whoops. And we'll leave it at that. So I'd like for you to write that question and tell me what you think is the answer, and explain why you think it is the answer that it is. Have a great day. Wear your seatbelt.